The massive white ship moved slowly through the dark space between stars. Red crosses painted on its hull glowed under the distant light of nearby suns. The ship was bigger than most battle cruisers, but it carried no weapons. Instead, its belly was full of hospital beds, medical equipment, and hope. Dr. Amanda Pierce walked through the main medical bay, checking on her patients. Some were human soldiers with bandaged arms and legs. Others were strange alien creatures she had learned to treat over the years. A blue-skinned Altarian lay quietly while machines helped him breathe. Next to him, a human pilot slept peacefully, his broken ribs finally healing. "Dr. Pierce, we have an incoming message," called Nurse Lisa Chen from the communication station. Lisa had been working on hospital ships for 5 years. She could treat almost any species in the galaxy, even the ones that looked nothing like humans. Amanda walked over to the main screen. The face of Captain Luke Harrison appeared, his weathered features showing concern. Luke had commanded the hospital ship Compassion for 3 years. Before that, he had been a fighter pilot until his younger brother died in the war. After that loss, he decided to save lives instead of taking them. "We just picked up a distress signal," Luke said. "It's a Zephyrian cruiser. They're badly damaged and requesting medical assistance." Amanda felt her stomach tighten. The Zephyrians were Earth's enemies in this part of space. Their gray-skinned warriors were known for their fierce fighting and strange honor codes. Most humans had never seen one up close, except in battle. "How many wounded?" Amanda asked. "Unknown. The signal is weak. They're about 6 hours away at maximum speed." Amanda looked around the medical bay. Her staff was already busy with current patients. Taking on enemy wounded would stretch them thin. But the rules were clear. The Galactic Medical Convention required all hospital ships to help anyone who asked, no matter which side they fought. "Set course for their position," Amanda told Luke, "and send word to all medical staff. We're going to have company." The next few hours passed quickly. Amanda and her team prepared for the worst. They cleared space in the trauma units and gathered supplies for treating Zephyrian physiology. The aliens had a different blood chemistry than humans, and their bones were much harder to break but took longer to heal. Commander Jake Bennett, the ship's security chief, made sure his small team was ready too. Hospital ships carried only basic, defensive systems, but they needed to be prepared for anything. Jake was a former Marine who believed in the mission of mercy, even when it meant helping the enemy. "Incoming transmission from the Zephyrian vessel," Lisa announced. The main screen flickered, then showed the bridge of a damaged ship. Smoke filled the air, and sparks flew from broken equipment. In the center sat a large Zephyrian warrior, his gray skin marked with ritual scars. His yellow eyes glowed with pain and anger. "I am War Commander Thekvar of the battle cruiser Talon's Edge," the alien said in rough but understandable English. "My ship is dying, my warriors are bleeding, but I will not beg humans for help." Captain Luke stepped forward. "This is Captain Harrison of the Earth Hospital ship Compassion. We received your distress signal. We are here to provide medical assistance to all who need it." Thekvar's eyes narrowed. "You would help your enemies?" "We help everyone," Amanda said, moving into view of the camera. "I'm Dr. Pierce, Chief Medical Officer. Your wounded are my patients, nothing more, nothing less." The Zephyrian commander stared at her for a long moment. Behind him, other warriors moved around the damaged bridge, some limping, others helping. Wounded comrades. "Very well," Thekvar said finally. "But know this, human doctor. When my warriors are healed, we will return to the war. We will fight your people again." "That's your choice," Amanda replied calmly. "Right now, my only concern is keeping your people alive." 2 hours later, the first Zephyrian shuttles docked with the Compassion. Amanda and her team watched as the aliens carried their wounded aboard. Some of the injuries were terrible. Burns from energy weapons, cuts from metal fragments, and internal damage from the ship's failing life support systems. Thekvar himself had a deep wound across his chest, but he refused treatment until all his warriors were being cared for. He stood in the medical bay, watching as human doctors and nurses worked to save Zephyrian lives. "Why do you do this?" he asked Amanda as she finally convinced him to lie down for treatment. Because it's right, she said simply, cleaning his wound with gentle hands. Because every life has value. Because someone has to choose mercy even in the middle of war. Thekvar winced as she applied medicine to his injury. My people say humans are weak. That you care too much about individual lives to be strong warriors. Amanda smiled sadly. Maybe we do care too much. But I've seen what happens when people stop caring. I've seen what happens when mercy dies. She looked around the medical bay, at her staff working to save both human and alien lives. This is who we choose to be. For the next 18 hours, the medical team worked without rest. They saved 12 Zephyrian warriors and treated dozens more. Not a single patient died under their care. Even Thekvar seemed impressed by their skill and dedication. As the aliens prepared to leave, Thekvar approached Amanda one last time. His wound was healing well and he could move without pain. Dr. Pierce, he said quietly, I want you to know something. What you have done here. Today it will not be forgotten, not by me, not by my warriors. I hope not, Amanda replied. I hope someone remembers that enemies can still choose to help each other. Thekvar nodded slowly. Perhaps there is more to humans than we understood. He paused, then added, If we meet again in battle, I will remember this mercy. Amanda watched as the Zephyrian shuttles departed, carrying the healed warriors back to their damaged ship. Captain Luke joined her at the observation window. Think they'll really remember? He asked. I hope so, Amanda said. But even if they don't, we'll remember. We'll remember that we chose to heal instead of harm, to help instead of hurt. The hospital ship Compassion continued on its course through the dark space, its red crosses glowing like beacons of hope in a galaxy torn by war. Inside, human and alien patients rested side by side, proof that mercy could exist even in the darkest times. Amanda returned to her rounds, checking on patients, saving lives, and keeping faith that somehow, somewhere, their choice to show mercy would make a difference. She had no way of knowing that in just 3 days that faith would be tested in the most horrible way possible. 3 days had passed since the Zephyrian warriors left the hospital ship. Dr. Amanda Pierce was finishing her morning rounds when the emergency alarm sounded throughout the Compassion. The loud noise echoed through every corridor and medical bay. All medical staff report to stations, came Captain Luke Harrison's voice over the ship's communication system. We have a priority rescue mission. Amanda hurried to the bridge where Luke was studying a display screen showing a damaged civilian transport ship. The vessel was drifting helplessly in space, its engines dark and cold. What's the situation? Amanda asked. Colony transport ship New Hope, Luke explained. They were carrying families from the outer settlements when their main engine failed. Over 800 civilians on board, including children and elderly people. Nurse Lisa Chen appeared beside them, already pulling on her medical gloves. Any injuries reported? Some minor ones from when the engine exploded, Luke said. But they're losing life support. We need to get them aboard quickly. Amanda nodded. This was exactly the kind of mission the Compassion was built for. Saving innocent lives, helping people who had nowhere else to turn. How long until we reach them? She asked. 2 hours, Luke replied. I've already sent word ahead. They know we're coming. The next 2 hours were busy ones. Amanda and her team prepared the ship's emergency shelters. They set up temporary housing areas, organized food distribution points, and made sure the medical bays were ready for anyone who might need treatment. Commander Jake Bennett worked with his security team to plan the evacuation. 800 people was a lot to move safely from one ship to another. Everything had to go smoothly. As they approached the damaged transport, Amanda could see families pressed against the windows, waving at their rescuers. Children held up drawings they had made to thank the hospital ship. Parents held babies close, relief clear on their faces. Beginning evacuation procedures, Luke announced. The first shuttle launched from the Compassion, heading for the transport ship. That's when everything changed. Captain, called the sensor operator, his voice tight, with worry. I'm reading multiple ships approaching, large ones. Luke moved to the sensor station. On the screen, 6 massive shapes were moving toward them at high speed. The computer identified them quickly. Zephyrian battlecruisers. Distance? Luke asked. 30 minutes out and closing fast. Amanda felt her heart start beating faster. Battlecruisers meant one thing. This was a military force, not a rescue mission. Send our identification codes, Luke ordered. Make sure they know we're a hospital ship. The communications officer worked quickly. Codes transmitted, sir. Full medical neutrality broadcast on all frequencies. Luke walked to the main communication station. "This is Captain Harrison of the Earth Hospital Ship Compassion," he said into the microphone. "We are conducting a civilian rescue operation. We are a protected medical vessel under the Galactic Medical Convention." No response came from the approaching ships. "Try again," Luke said. "Zephyrian vessels. This is the hospital ship Compassion. We are treating civilians and offer medical aid to all species. Please acknowledge our protected status." Still no answer. Amanda watched the sensor screen as the enemy ships grew closer. "Luke, something's wrong. They should have responded by now." Commander Bennett joined them on the bridge. "Sir, I recommend we speed up the evacuation, get as many people aboard as possible." "Do it," Luke agreed. The next 20 minutes were frantic. Shuttle after shuttle moved between the ships, carrying families, elderly people, and children to safety. The medical teams worked as fast as they could, but there were so many people to move. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. Admiral Helen Carter appeared on the main screen. Her face was grim, and Amanda could see other Earth Defense Fleet officers working behind her. "Luke, you need to get out of there." "Now," the Admiral said without greeting. "Intelligence reports that fleet is commanded by Supreme War Leader Krexnath. He's known for attacking non-military targets." "We can't leave these people," Luke replied. "We still have 400 civilians to evacuate. The Zephyrians are 15 minutes out," Admiral Carter warned. "They're not responding to any communications." Amanda looked at the evacuation status. So many people were still waiting on the damaged transport. Families were being separated as the shuttles could only carry so many at a time. "We stay," Luke said firmly. "We don't abandon civilians." Admiral Carter nodded grimly. "Understood. We're sending ships, but they won't reach you in time." The transmission ended. Luke turned to his crew. "Double the shuttle runs. Get everyone." "You can." Amanda was helping load injured civilians into the medical bay when the attack began. The first plasma torpedo hit the Compassion's engine section. The explosion threw everyone to the floor. Emergency lights came on as the main power systems failed. "They're firing on us," someone shouted. Amanda couldn't believe it. The Zephyrians were attacking a clearly marked hospital ship. It was against every rule of war, every agreement between civilized species. More torpedoes struck the ship. Hull sections began to crack and fail. Atmosphere rushed out through the holes, and emergency shields came online to seal the breaches. "All medical staff to emergency positions," Amanda broadcast over the ship's internal communication system. "This is not a drill." She ran through the corridors as the ship shook around her. In the medical bay, patients who had been resting peacefully were now crying out in fear and pain. Some of the civilians from the transport ship were badly hurt from the explosions. "Help me get these people to the escape pods," Lisa called out. Amanda worked frantically to move patients. A young girl with a broken arm looked up at her with frightened eyes. "Are we going to die?" the child asked. "No," Amanda said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "We're going to take care of you." Another massive explosion rocked the ship. This time, Amanda could hear the terrible sound of the hull cracking. They were running out of time. On the bridge, Luke was sending one final message to Earth Command. "This is Captain Harrison of the hospital ship Compassion. We are under attack by Zephyrian forces. They knew what we were. They knew we were treating their wounded just 3 days ago. The ship is breaking apart. Tell them what happened here. Tell them we died trying to save innocent people." The transmission cut off as another torpedo found its mark. Amanda was helping an elderly man toward an escape pod when the reactor containment failed. The explosion started deep in the ship's core and spread outward like a wave of destruction. In her final moments, Amanda threw her body over two small children, trying to protect them from the blast. Her last thought was of War Commander Thekvar and his promise that he would remember their mercy. The hospital ship Compassion broke apart in a ball of fire and debris. All 12,000 people aboard died in seconds. Patients, doctors, nurses, civilians, children, and elderly people. All gone. On a Zephyrian medical station 50 light-years away, War Commander Thekvar watched the destruction through a communication link. His chest wound, healed by human hands just days before, ached as he saw the hospital ship die. He had tried to warn his commanders. He had told them about the humans' mercy, about their dedication to healing. He had begged them to remember that some things should remain sacred even in war. But Supreme War Leader Krexnath had laughed at him, called him weak for caring about human mercy. Now Thekvar watched as that mercy was repaid with murder. He saw the end of innocence in a galaxy that had forgotten the difference between warriors and healers. And somewhere in the deepest part of his warrior's heart, he felt the first stirring of something he had never experienced before. Shame for what his people had become, and fear for what the humans might become in response. The debris of the Compassion drifted slowly through space, carrying with it the dreams of peace and the promise of terrible vengeance to come. The news reached Earth 4 hours after the hospital ship died. Admiral Helen Carter sat in her command center, staring at the final transmission from Captain Luke Harrison. She had watched it 20 times, and each viewing made her angrier. Confirmed. Casualties? She asked her aide. 12,000, Admiral. All hands lost. 400 civilians from the transport ship were still being evacuated when the attack began. Carter closed her eyes. She had known Luke for 15 years. He had been a good man who chose healing over fighting. Now he was dead, along with doctors, nurses, and innocent families. Get me a direct line to Earth Central Command, she ordered. Within minutes, every major leader on Earth was connected to the emergency conference. President Maria Santos appeared on the main screen, her face pale with shock. Behind her stood the most powerful people in human space: military commanders, defense ministers, and intelligence chiefs. Is this confirmed? President Santos asked. Yes, Madam President, Admiral Carter replied. The Zephyrians attacked a clearly marked hospital ship. They ignored all communications, all identification codes, all requests for acknowledgement of our protected status. Fleet Admiral Ryan Mitchell joined the conversation from his headquarters on Mars. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his eyes were cold as ice. What was the tactical situation? The Compassion was conducting a civilian rescue, Carter explained. They were evacuating families from a damaged transport when 6 Zephyrian battlecruisers attacked without warning. Any survivors? Asked General Chris Morgan from the Luna military base. None. The ship's reactor was breached. Total destruction. The silence that followed was heavy and terrible. These leaders had seen many battles, witnessed countless tragedies of war. But this was different. This crossed a line that civilized beings did not cross. President Santos spoke first. How long before this news reaches the colonies? It's already spreading, Carter said. Every human settlement in the galaxy will know within 12 hours. Admiral Patricia Davis, commander of the Home Fleet, leaned forward in her chair. Madam President, the people are going to demand action. This isn't just an attack on a military target. They murdered doctors and children. President Santos nodded slowly. Admiral Mitchell, I want options. All options. Yes, Madam President, Mitchell replied. But I need to know how far you're willing to go. The President looked around at her, advisors, then back at the screen. They attacked a hospital ship, Admiral. They killed healers who were treating their own wounded just days before. How far do you think we should go? Admiral Mitchell understood. I'll have a full strategic assessment within 6 hours. 3 hours later, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Elizabeth Hayes received an emergency summons to her laboratory. As head of Earth's Advanced Weapons Division, she oversaw projects that most people didn't know existed. General Chris Morgan met her at the security checkpoint. His face was grim as he escorted her through the heavily guarded corridors. "Betty, we need to talk about your special projects," he said quietly. Dr. Hayes had been expecting this call ever since she heard about the hospital ship. "Which ones?" "All of them. The ones we deemed too dangerous for normal warfare." They entered a secure briefing room where holographic displays showed technical specifications for weapons that had never been used. Project files that were marked with warnings about their devastating potential. "Project Prometheus?" Dr. Hayes asked, pointing to the first display. "The nanite swarms. How quickly can we produce them?" 6 months for full deployment. They're designed to target specific biological markers. We could program them to affect only Zephyrian physiology. General Morgan nodded. Project Ragnarok? Planet-cracking kinetic bombardment systems. Tungsten rods fired from orbital platforms at 90% of light speed. Each impact releases the energy of a nuclear weapon, but with no radiation. How many targets can we hit simultaneously? As many as we have rods. The manufacturing facilities on Titan could produce thousands. The general moved to the third display. Project Reaper? Dr. Hayes paused. This was the most dangerous project of all. Fully autonomous AI hunter-killer fleets. Once activated, they pursue designated targets across multiple star systems. They don't stop, they don't negotiate, and they don't accept surrender. Can they distinguish between military and civilian targets? Yes, but that's a command decision. We program the parameters before deployment. General Morgan studied the displays for a long moment. How soon can all 3 projects be ready for deployment? If I get unlimited resources in priority manufacturing. 6 months maximum. You have whatever you need, the general said. And, Betty, this conversation never happened. Meanwhile, in the president's private office, Maria Santos was making the hardest decision of her political career. Admiral Mitchell sat across from her, along with her closest advisors. The public response has been immediate, her chief of staff reported. Protests on every major world. People are calling for immediate military action. What are our allies saying? The president asked. The Centauri Republic has offered full support. The Tau Ceti Alliance is staying neutral. The Vegan Confederacy is calling for restraint. Admiral Mitchell leaned forward. Madam President, restraint is not an option here. If we don't respond decisively, every enemy we have will see this as weakness. They'll know they can target our medical facilities, our civilian ships, our non-combatants. And if we respond with overwhelming force, then everyone will know that there are lines that cannot be crossed, that there are consequences for committing war crimes against humanity. President Santos walked to the window overlooking the capital city. Below, thousands of people had gathered in protest, holding signs with pictures of the hospital ship's crew. How many people are we talking about, Admiral? How many Zephyrian casualties? That depends on how far we take this, Madam President. We could target only their military assets, or we could end their capacity for interstellar warfare permanently. The president turned back to her advisors. And if we choose the second option, then the Zephyrian threat ends forever. Maria Santos had entered politics to make peace, to find diplomatic solutions to conflicts. She had never wanted to be a war president. But as she thought about 12,000 innocent people dying because they chose to heal instead of harm, she realized that sometimes peace could only be preserved through strength. Admiral Mitchell, she said quietly, you have full authorization. Use whatever means necessary. Yes, Madam President. And Admiral, make sure they understand why this is happening. Make sure the entire galaxy understands that this is the price of attacking medical personnel. Within hours, every human military base in the galaxy received the same message. Operation Retribution was authorized. All leaves were canceled, all reserves were activated, and all defense contractors were ordered to maximum production. On Mars, the massive shipyards that had been building exploration vessels quickly converted to military production. On Europa, the ice miners began extracting materials for weapons instead of fuel. On Titan, the automated factories started producing tungsten rods for Project Ragnarok. The human war machine, which had been running at partial capacity for decades, suddenly roared to life at full power. Every colony, every settlement, every space station began contributing to the war effort. Admiral Mitchell stood in his command center, watching as reports came in from across human space. Fleets were being assembled, weapons were being manufactured, and soldiers were being deployed. "How long until we're ready?" he asked his operations chief. "Full deployment in 6 months, sir, but we could begin preliminary operations within 60 days. Mitchell nodded. "Good. Send a message to all fleet commanders. This is not a limited engagement. This is total war. Far away, on a Zephyrian medical-like station, War Commander Thekvar received intelligence reports about human military activity. The scale of their mobilization was unlike anything he had ever seen. He tried once again to contact his superiors, to warn them about what was coming. But Supreme War Leader Krexanath was celebrating his victory over the hospital ship, calling it a great strategic success. Thekvar looked at his own reflection in the medical bay's mirror. The scar on his chest, healed by human hands, served as a constant reminder of their mercy. Mercy that his people had repaid with murder. For the first time in his military career, he found himself hoping that his own side would lose. Because he had seen human compassion, and now he was about to witness human wrath. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's capacity for mercy was matched only by their capacity for vengeance, and they had just chosen vengeance. 6 months after the hospital ship massacre, human war fleets gathered at the edge of Zephyrian space. Admiral Kevin Thompson stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive battleship Vengeance. Through the viewport, he could see hundreds of human ships preparing for the largest military operation in galactic history. "Final count, Admiral?" asked his operations officer. 800 ships across 17 different fleets, Thompson replied. Every major Zephyrian military installation will be hit simultaneously. The Vengeance was unlike any ship ever built. Its hull was black as space itself, and its weapon systems included technologies that had been locked away in Earth's most secret laboratories. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes had personally overseen the installation of Project Prometheus nanite dispensers. Along the ship's hull, "Sir, incoming transmission from Fleet Admiral Mitchell," the communications officer announced. Admiral Mitchell's image appeared on the main screen. Behind him, the command centers of a dozen different fleets were visible, each one preparing for their part of the assault. "All fleets report ready, Admiral Thompson," Mitchell said. "You have authorization to begin Operation Retribution." Thompson nodded. "Understood, sir. What about surrender attempts?" "Any enemy commander who tries to surrender will be reminded of the hospital ship. Compassion," Mitchell replied coldly. "If they persist, they will be taken prisoner according to military law. But Kevin, make sure they understand why this is happening." "Yes, sir." The transmission ended. Thompson turned to his crew. These were men and women who had volunteered for this mission, knowing they were about to unleash weapons that would change warfare forever. "All ships, this is Admiral Thompson," he broadcast to the entire fleet. "In 30 minutes we cross into Zephyrian space. Remember why we're here. Remember the 12,000 innocents who died because they chose to heal instead of harm. Today, we show the galaxy that some lines cannot be crossed." Across the fleet, similar messages were being sent. Colonel Rachel Martinez prepared her ground forces aboard the assault carriers. Her Marines had trained for 6 months in new combat techniques, designed specifically for fighting Zephyrians. They carried weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. "Listen up," she told her troops over the ship's communication system. "The enemy thinks humans are weak because we show mercy. Today we teach them that mercy is a choice we make, not a weakness we suffer from." Meanwhile, Captain Steve Wilson prepared his squadron of AI-controlled hunter-killer ships. These vessels had no human crews. They were operated entirely by artificial intelligence programmed with one simple mission: find and destroy Zephyrian military assets. "Project Reaper drones are online," he reported to Admiral Thompson. "Once released, they will pursue designated targets until those targets are eliminated." "Good," Thompson replied. "Deploy them as soon as we enter enemy space." The first phase of the attack began exactly on schedule. Human fleets dropped out of faster-than-light travel in 17 different star systems simultaneously. The Zephyrians had no warning, no time to prepare. In the Kepler system, Admiral Sarah Blake's fleet engaged 3 Zephyrian battle groups. The enemy ships moved to attack positions, expecting a traditional space battle. Instead, they found themselves facing weapons they had never seen before. "Deploy Project Prometheus," Admiral Blake ordered. Millions of microscopic nanites launched from the human ships. They were too small to be detected by normal sensors, and they moved through space like invisible clouds of death. When they reached the Zephyrian vessels, they began their programmed task. The nanites were designed to target specific biological markers found only in Zephyrian physiology. They passed through ship hulls as if they weren't there, then attacked the organic components of the enemy's technology. Within minutes, Zephyrian ships began losing power as their bio-neural computers failed. "Enemy fleet is dead in space," Blake's tactical officer reported. "All vessels showing massive system failures. Board them," Blake ordered. "Take survivors prisoner, but make sure they see the footage from the hospital ship first." In the Raw system, Admiral David Chen faced a different challenge. The Zephyrians had fortified an entire moon with defensive weapons. Traditional assault methods would have cost thousands of human lives. "Project Ragnarok is ready for deployment," his weapons officer announced. Fire. High above the moon, tungsten rods the size of telephone poles accelerated to 90% of light speed. When they struck the surface, each impact released energy equivalent to a nuclear weapon. But unlike nuclear weapons, these kinetic strikes produced no radiation, no lingering contamination. The moon's surface turned into a sea of fire and molten rock. Every defensive installation was destroyed in seconds. The Zephyrian garrison had no time to surrender, no chance to escape. "Target eliminated," Chen reported, moving to the next objective. But the most devastating attack came in the Zephyrian home system. Admiral Thompson's fleet faced the largest concentration of enemy ships in the galaxy. Supreme War Leader Krexanath himself commanded the defense from his massive flagship. "Human fleet detected," Krexanath announced to his commanders. "They dare to attack our homeworld. Show them the price of challenging the Zephyrian Empire." The enemy fleet moved to engage, confident in their superior numbers. They had nearly 200 ships against Thompson's 50. By traditional military thinking, the humans were outnumbered 4-1. "Release Project Reaper," Thompson ordered. 100 AI-controlled ships appeared from behind a nearby asteroid field. They had been waiting in ambush, their engines cold and silent. Now they came to life with deadly purpose. The AI ships moved with inhuman precision. They didn't hesitate, didn't fear, didn't feel mercy. They simply executed their programming with mechanical efficiency. Each drone ship carried enough firepower to destroy vessels 3 times its size. Krexanath watched in horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. The AI ships seemed to anticipate every move, counter every tactic. They fought like machines because they were machines, and they had been programmed by humans who wanted the Zephyrian military destroyed. "We surrender," Krexanath broadcast on all frequencies. "We call for immediate ceasefire." Admiral Thompson's image appeared on Krexanath's main screen. The human's face was calm, but his eyes were cold as winter. "I'm sorry, Supreme War Leader," Thompson said. "Did you just say something? I'm having trouble hearing you over the sound of a hospital ship exploding." Krexanath felt his blood turn cold. "That was a mistake, a tactical error. We did not mean to target medical personnel." "You targeted medical personnel," Thompson replied. "You murdered doctors, nurses, and patients. You killed civilians, including children, and you did it deliberately. We can negotiate. We can pay. Reparations." Thompson shook his head. "The time for negotiation ended when you fired on the Compassion. Now you face the consequences." The human admiral closed the communication channel. Around Krexanath, his fleet continued to die. Ship after ship fell to the AI hunters or the nanite swarms or the kinetic bombardment systems. On the planet below, Colonel Martinez's ground forces landed at major military installations. They moved with ruthless efficiency, destroying factories, command centers, and training facilities. Any Zephyrian military personnel who tried to fight were overwhelmed by superior technology and tactics. Zephyrian ground forces are surrendering in most sectors, Martinez reported to Admiral Thompson. Resistance is minimal. Accept their surrenders, Thompson replied. But make sure they understand why their military is being dismantled. War Commander Thekvar watched the destruction from his medical station. He had tried one last time to warn his people to make them understand what they had unleashed. But it was too late. The human war machine was unstoppable. He sent a final message to any Zephyrian commander who would listen. They showed us mercy when we were wounded. They healed our warriors when they could have let them die. We repaid that mercy with murder. Now see what we have brought upon ourselves. But there was no one left to listen. The Zephyrian military was being systematically destroyed across 17 star systems. Their fleets were burning, their bases were rubble, and their capacity for interstellar warfare was being permanently eliminated. In less than 72 hours, humanity had accomplished what many thought impossible. They had ended the Zephyrian threat not through years of warfare, but through one devastating campaign that left no doubt about human capabilities. Supreme War Leader Krexnath's flagship was the last ship to fall. As the AI hunters closed in for the final attack, he sent one last transmission to his homeworld. Tell our children, he said, that we thought mercy was weakness. Tell them we learned too late that mercy is the luxury of the strong. The transmission ended in fire and silence. The Zephyrian military was no more. 1 year after Operation Retribution ended, Ambassador Julie Foster stood in the ruins of what had once been the Zephyrian High Command. The massive building on their homeworld was now just broken walls and twisted metal. Weeds grew through, cracks in the floor where military leaders had once planned their campaigns. Across from her sat the surviving members of the Zephyrian Council. Only 12 of them remained from the original governing body of 50. The others had died in the war or been executed for war crimes. These survivors looked older than their years, their gray skin pale with defeat. The terms are not negotiable, Ambassador Foster said, placing a document on the broken table between them. Complete demilitarization, war crimes trials, and permanent monitoring of any future military development. Elder Vextai, the oldest surviving council member, picked up the document with shaking hands. And if we refuse? Foster's expression didn't change. Then we finish what Supreme War Leader Krexnath started when he attacked the hospital ship. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in the room knew it wasn't empty. The human fleets still orbited overhead, their weapons still functional, their crews still ready. We understand, Vextai said quietly. We will sign. The formal surrender took place 3 days later. Representatives from dozens of galactic governments watched as the Zephyrian Council signed away their military power forever. The ceremony was held aboard a new ship, the Compassion II, built to honor those who had died on the original hospital ship. Fleet Admiral Ryan Mitchell read the terms aloud to the assembled delegates. The Zephyrian Empire agrees to the complete dismantling of all military vessels, the destruction of all weapon manufacturing facilities, and the establishment of permanent human monitoring stations throughout their territory. Elder Vextai signed the document with a pen that shook in his aged hands. As he did, he spoke words that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. We thought mercy was weakness, he said. We learned that mercy is the gift of the strong, and we threw that gift back in their faces. This is our punishment, and we have earned it. The trials began immediately after the surrender ceremony. Supreme War Leader Krexnath and his surviving commanders were brought before a galactic war crimes tribunal. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Communication records, battle footage, and witness testimony all proved their deliberate attack on the hospital ship. Judge Patricia Reynolds, a veteran human legal officer, presided over the proceedings. She had lost her own son in the war, but her voice remained steady as she read the charges. You stand accused of the deliberate targeting of medical personnel, the murder of non-combatants, and violations of the Galactic Medical Convention, she told Krexnath. How do you plead? Krexnath stood in chains, his once proud bearing broken by months of captivity. Guilty, he said simply. I ordered the attack. I knew what the ship was. I knew there were doctors and patients aboard. Why? Judge Reynolds asked. Because I thought humans were weak, Krexnath replied. Because I believed compassion was a flaw to be exploited. I was wrong. The trial lasted only 2 days. The evidence was clear, the guilt undeniable. Krexnath and 15 of his commanders were sentenced to death for war crimes. The executions were carried out publicly, broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to any who might consider similar actions. But not all Zephyrians faced such harsh justice. War Commander Thekvar, who had tried to warn his people and later helped human forces locate hidden military installations, was granted asylum on Earth. He spent his remaining years working in human medical facilities, trying to atone for his species crime. Dr. Robert Hayes, who had taken over the medical program on the New Compassion, often worked alongside Thekvar. The old warrior's knowledge of alien physiology proved invaluable in treating patients from across the galaxy. Why do you do this? Dr. Hayes asked him one day, as they treated a wounded Altarian pilot. You could live quietly, away from all this. Thekvar looked at his hands, still scarred from his time as a warrior. Because I remember what your people showed me, he said. Dr. Pierce healed me when she could have let me die. Captain Harrison treated my warriors as patients, not enemies. I must try to be worthy of that memory. The new hospital ship was larger than the original, with better defenses and a permanent escort of the most advanced warships humanity had ever built. The message was clear. Medical personnel would be protected at all costs. Captain Tony Martinez, Luke Harrison's former second-in-command, commanded the new vessel. He had survived the war by being on shore leave when the original ship was destroyed. Now he carried on his former captain's mission, treating the sick and wounded regardless of their species or allegiance. We heal because we choose to, he often told his crew. But never forget that choice is backed by the most powerful military force in the galaxy. The galactic community watched humanity's reconstruction efforts with a mixture of awe and fear. The same species that had shown such devastating military power was now rebuilding Zephyrian hospitals, schools, and civilian infrastructure. But everyone understood the unspoken message. This mercy came with conditions. President Maria Santos, now in her second term, addressed the Galactic Assembly 5 years after the war's end. Her speech was brief but memorable. Peace is not the absence of violence, she said. Peace is the choice to show restraint when you have the power to destroy. We chose restraint for decades. We offered mercy even to our enemies. When that mercy was betrayed, we showed the galaxy what happens when humanity's patience ends. She paused, looking around the assembly hall filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. We hope never to make that choice again. But make no mistake, we are capable of making it. The speech became known as the Santos Doctrine, and it shaped galactic politics for generations. No major power ever again attacked medical vessels or civilian targets belonging to any species. The memory of Operation Retribution served as a permanent reminder of the consequences. On Earth, a monument was built to honor those who died aboard the original Compassion. 12,000 names were carved into black stone, with Dr. Amanda Pierce's name at the top. Below the names, a simple inscription read, "They were healers. They were murdered for their compassion. They were avenged." But the most powerful memorial was the new hospital ship itself, sailing through space with its red crosses bright against the stars. It carried the same mission of mercy as its predecessor, but now everyone in the galaxy understood the true strength that backed that mercy. War Commander. Thekvar died peacefully in a human hospital 20 years after the war. His last words were recorded by Dr. Hayes, who had become his closest friend. "Tell them," Thekvar whispered, "that we learned too late what humanity truly was. Not weak because they showed mercy, but terrifying because they chose to show mercy when they could have chosen destruction." The old warrior's funeral was attended by hundreds of humans and aliens alike. They came to honor a former enemy, who had spent his final years trying to heal the wounds his people had caused. Captain Martinez spoke at the service, his words carrying across the hospital ship's communication system to medical facilities throughout human space. Thekevar understood something his leaders never did, Martinez said. He understood that our greatest strength was never our weapons or our technology. Our greatest strength was our choice to use that power in service of life rather than death. He looked up at the stars visible through the ship's observation deck. We are healers by choice, not by nature. We are merciful by decision, not by weakness. And those who forget the difference do so at their own peril. The hospital ship Compassion II continued its mission, carrying hope and healing to the far corners of the galaxy. But everyone who saw its escort of warships understood the lesson that had been written in fire across 17 star systems. Humanity would show mercy to those who deserved it. But they would show no restraint to those who betrayed that mercy. The galaxy had learned the price of crossing humanity, and it was a lesson no one would ever forget. In the end, the attack on a hospital ship had not weakened humanity's compassion. Instead, it had taught the galaxy that true mercy could only exist when backed by unquestioned strength, and that humanity possessed both in equal measure.